Hi, my name is David Bowes. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for Washington Policy Center, and this is Washington Policy on the Go. Every other week, we come to you with the latest from our center directors and give you a chance to ask them questions, find out about their latest research, and talk through some of the big issues of the day. Today, we'll be hearing from Liv Finne, our Center for Education Director, but she'll be second. We'll talk with her about some rural fight back in our schools, where rural schools were fighting back against the domination by urban schools because of some new activity. I don't want to spoil it, but that'll be coming up a bit later on in the program. But before that, we'll be checking in with Elizabeth Hovde our Center for Healthcare Director. But before we do that, I do want to go through the ground rules for those of you who are joining us for the first time. You can ask a question at any time. There's a little Q&A, like a dialog box in the bottom of Zoom. Just type your question into that, and we try and incorporate it into the interview as soon as they come in. I try to make sure that we get all the questions asked and answered. We have had some people with, a whole slew of questions. Sometimes we can't get to them all. If that happens, I want you to know, if you go to washingtonpolicy.org and go to our staff page, our center directors have their email available, so you can always ask them a question outside of this broadcast as well. Also, if you see something in the broadcast you want to share, we upload these to YouTube, our YouTube channel, usually within 24 to 48 hours of the event, usually within a day, but sometimes it takes us two. And then you can share that with friends as well. And again, these happen every other week, and then every week during the legislative session. So be sure to mark your calendars and join us. And we try not to spam you too much that they're going on. We try and give you a little reminder about an hour beforehand. But it's every other Tuesday, unless we tell you it's not happening for a holiday or something along those lines. So with that, let's bring Elizabeth Hovde, our Center for Healthcare Director, on to talk about Washington Cares. What else with Elizabeth? This is the infamous payroll tax that we've been talking about, where you lose 58 cents per $100 that you earn if you're a worker in Washington State, unless you were one of the happy near 500,000 people that opted out when you had that little window. And if you already had a private insurance plan, if you're one of the luckies to opt out, like Elizabeth is, as she'll remind you, you are not paying this, but others are. And Elizabeth, you wrote a blog about 355 or so self-employed workers. And first of all, I love the 300 because it reminds me of the 300 Spartans, the small happy few. But in this case, the 300 is people who chose to, self-employed workers who chose to opt in to the WACare. They opted to tax themselves. And when you typed this out and you published this blog, you were asked if this was a typo, if this was a mistake on your part, because they said, if this number is true, we knew it would be bad. We knew it would be a disaster. But if this number is true, it becomes a legendary disaster. Give us some insight as to why some are looking at this number and proclaiming it to be a legendary disaster.
Yeah. First of all, no one ever wants to be a one-hit wonder. Type your favorite band name into the chat session. But WACares is the gift that keeps giving for outrageous kind of commentary, and someone wrote in saying, are you really serious? Is it 355? Was that a typo? And I thought, if you create a long-term care benefit that's inadequate, that you might only watch legends be made. I mean, this is the deal. I wasn't surprised by the number 355 at the recent meetings, saying that was how many people opted in to WACares since January. But long ago in one of the meetings about WACares with the commission that oversees it, they talked about how they didn't expect high uptake based on experience with the paid family and medical leave fund. That was a low opt-in as well. So it was expected by some of us that it wouldn't be big. I guess I didn't maybe see it being that low. And it was just interesting in contrast. I think there were, maybe you see it in front of you, Dave, but there's nearly I think 50,000 people who can opt out now, which includes people who live out of state but work in state, military spouses, veterans with some disability status, and people on non-immigrant work visas. And if you add all those together, I think it's about 50 grand that are opting out compared to this 355. And in the meeting, they were talking just about the non-immigrant work visas and the self-employed. But
I mean, just to highlight that point, what you write is that the consultant that advised the state on the fiscal note, when they went through their actuary models and we're trying to figure out what would be the appropriate number of people who are going to opt into this thing based on how many self-employed there is in Washington, about 10% of the work population, as you pointed out, they said that on the low end, that they could conservatively say we could expect 40,000 applicants to opt into this new wild care social program / payroll tax for the first year. And as you point out, we're at 355 so far, and it's October. So, there's in the words of the great, I think it was Bob Bucher in that wonderful Major League Baseball movie, just a bit outside,
right.
just a bit off. What does that matter? I mean, how does that impact the the fiscal note, the financial stability of the program? Because remember, originally it was awash in red ink, and then the state commissioned this new study to take a look at it and said, oh, lo and behold, it's in the black. It's just fine. Where do these numbers fall on that, and how does it impact the stability of the program?
Well, I never want Milliman, the actuarial firm, to be thrown under the bus under the state's bad marketing. It's the state's bad marketing that is calling this thing solvent and a sure thing and something you can have peace of mind about. Milliman actually, in its actuarial studies, gives various scenarios where this might pencil out and where it might not. And so it's a good question with few people opting in, as we're seeing, and with more people opting out than was ever expected. Like you said, there were nearly, I don't think you said it, the number, but there were nearly 500,000 people that opted out before under the if you had a private long-term care insurance plan provision. So
right.
now,
and now if we add these new 50,000, I think we actually get over the 500,000 mark of people opting out. Yeah.
Definitely. And it will keep growing. That second pool of people, the 4 things I ran off about people who could be eligible, the out-of-state worker, etc., they can always apply. So there'll always be new exemptions coming in for people who are new workers to the state but live outside, or new military spouses, vets, and non-immigrant work visas. And the interesting thing about the non-immigrant work visa angle is that it takes a lot of time to go through that application process. So the Employment Security Department has actually requested that the commission suggests to the legislature that they make that an automatic opt-out, which we've been advising from the very beginning as being fair to these people. So there is going to be advice going forward to the legislature to make that change, because it's just costing in administrative fees. So that's another thing that's adding to the solvency problem that I see being a possibility. So this thing might be solvent, it might not. Milliman says it will probably be solvent, but they're not sure. And the state is going full bore with it's solvent, you can have peace of mind. I don't have peace of mind about it for anyone. I think that the qualifications that are needed to, the requirements that are required to qualify for this program are also still in the making, right? And that could be tweaked or amended at any time. I wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, I have a problem if if you have assumptions being made, and on the conservative end, you're guessing 40,000 people are going to show up, and instead you get 300 and originally it was 355, now it's like 383 or something. Doesn't matter, you're still in the 300s versus 40,000. that's way, way, way off. And I just think how many other things are off by your assumptions. You thought people really wanted this, even though they've said no to other things before, payroll taxes. You see the prices people are paying at the pump, at grocery stores and other things. I realize this is a different social program benefit, but it's still a tax. It's still impacting people's paychecks. People responded by clamoring to they basically shut down the private market to escape, trying to get their own plan in and opt out of this thing. And yet, the approach of the government was, we had one approach that showed they were in red ink, and then they changed things, and lo and behold, we got it in the black, and these assumptions are already wrong. And so it makes you wonder, how wrong are they about everything else? And, are they even concerned about accuracy? Because, they've been plowing through despite all the different information. If this was a free market, there's lots of different informational price points telling people, the people, the customers are saying, we don't want this. We don't want it so bad. We're willing to sit on the phone and wait, for a long period of time trying to talk to an insurance agent, or we're sitting at the office trying to go through a bunch of tedious paperwork. Mark has a question. How much is Washington spending to promote this mandatory program?
Oh, go ahead. Was there more of the question?
No, I like the fact that he inserted the word mandatory there, because that's been a problem I've had for years too, where government says something's mandatory and then they have a marketing campaign, even though you're forced to do it anyway.
Right. I mean, it's really
thank you, sir. May I have another? Yeah.
It's really wasteful. I wish they'd stop all of the communication efforts surrounding it. I wish they'd focus on information about how people will be able to apply for this benefit someday, and actuarial information. And by the way, I think Milliman's doing a great job as an actuarial firm. I don't even remember if 10% was the conservative number, or if there was even a lower number. Can't remember that right now, but it's the state's interpretation and desires that are off mark here. And having any of the administrative costs for this program going toward marketing it, making us like it, even though we're stuck with it and can't do anything about it, is just a waste of money. And no, I haven't gotten the total figure on that yet, but it's in the thousands. And there are requests, well, hundreds of thousands, I'm sure. I really don't know. But there are requests all the time to increase the budget for ESD to administer this program. And that will continue. And that continues in part because of the opt-outs, in part because of analyzing exemptions. But just the marketing alone, making us feel like Walk Hairs is a good thing, or wanting us to feel like it's a good thing, is inappropriate for government to be doing. And I do need to get that number. I need to look for that.
Sandra has a question. She wants to know, based on, how do they come up with the number, with expecting 40,000 would opt in if the opt-ins for the paid family medical leave is not near those numbers? And do we have the number of opt-ins for the paid family medical leave?
They do have a number, and they had a percent, which is why they did not expect a lot of uptake. And what I looked at was not what Milliman was anticipating for sure would get involved in this. It was looking at an ESD fiscal note that asked for money to accommodate looking over possible opt-ins. So I don't know if that was in part, you're asking for money to accommodate 40,000. That's going to get you more money in a legislative situation than saying, hey, we only expect 300 people to do it. Give us money for that. Yeah. So that's something to be figured out by the state. But they did write me after that blog ran, and they said, hey, we just used the 10% that was in the Milliman study on one of the scenarios, but that is the number they use for their fiscal note. And I don't know their intentions and how much they actually expected.
I'm changing topics for a bit, although I appreciate the insight there. And I was just blown away by, the 355 number, because it's just so much smaller than what the state's expecting. There should be a lot of humiliation, but we'll see what happens.
Well, and again, I don't think the state expected it. Just because there's a fiscal note asking you to have money for 40,000 applications doesn't mean you expected 40,000. And again, in long-term care meetings, before this, long-term care commission meetings, they said they don't expect much uptake. So I frankly was not surprised by the 355 number. I was surprised by the fiscal note asking for money to administer 40,000 exemptions.
Yeah, and that's the key. Plus, we also have the as you point out, the big new influx of people wanting out. I mean, so again, there's yet more information out there going to the powers that be saying, we don't actually want this. People are not clamoring for that. And as you've pointed out before, people plan for long-term care in all kinds of different ways. Sometimes it's, a different property for themselves, and other things. So,
and if I could say one more thing about
sure.
that, I don't think that the intention was ever, who can read intentions, but the main goal of this program, even if the attention is there, is not that it'll help everybody have long-term care needs provided for. This is to save the Medicaid budget money on long-term care services.
Yeah.
So what the state needs to do, and what governments all around the nation need to do, is protect and strengthen Medicaid for people in need and not create a new safety net for people who are going to be in need and people who don't need taxpayer generosity and support for life needs. So what they've done here is really put themselves in a situation where I'm afraid they're going to be making their long-term care situation worse. They're telling people you have peace of mind. You don't have to plan for it. That was the problem to begin with. People weren't planning for it, and they're abusing the Medicaid system, which can help with it if you have no assets and no income. So people are paying down assets, they don't have income, so they can get a hold of this Medicaid money. We've been doing this for decades. Financial planners know it. People who have money know it. People who don't have money learn it. So it's just, Medicaid is in need of reform. We need to get eligible people, able-bodied and resource people away from the money that is meant to be a safety net for people in need.
Yeah, it's always important to clarify that they've developed a safety net for people who need no safety net, and they're treating them equally to those who actually do need a safety net. So at some point, if people have are the means to care for themselves, why are we providing that net? And why are we taxing everybody for it?
I can't believe we're not outraged, all of us. I'm outraged constantly by this, but why everyone isn't speaking out against taking money from a low-income worker who can barely feed their kids and has to work 3 jobs and is giving it to someone who does not need taxpayer money. It's just the worst part of this program, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. I almost forgot about this because we've talked about this issue so many times. I was going to have you switch hats and go to your workers' rights hat for a moment. To talk about the eradication of job barriers. But before I do,
this is the workers' right issue. I think it's become. But.
It's a 2-hat issue.
Yeah.
But there was an ad, or there was a story. I was going to say an ad in Seattle Stranger magazine, probably the favorite publication of everyone watching. Seattle's Stranger did this attack piece on you, saying that, and this was interesting to me because the Stranger always claims to talk for the downtrodden, the working men in Seattle, working men and women. And so there's this new tax that comes along in the midst of high inflation, a sharp increase in gas prices and grocery prices and other things. And then the legislature comes along and hits us with a payroll tax. And their response is, let's do a hit piece on the researcher that is questioning the government's approach on this project. And I just thought that was kind of fascinating because they call you out on hypocrisy because at one point you were hospitalized because of a serious skiing accident injury. And they say your refusal to support this mandatory program is hypocritical because some of your friends and colleagues held a GoFundMe and charitable races so that they could contribute to your medical bills. I just wanted to briefly touch on that with you and get your response to the Stranger's piece there.
It's been interesting. I had this near fatal accident in 2011. I was in a coma I was in a hospitalized for a coma for about 6 weeks, and then was recovering at home after that. And my friends threw a 5K run I didn't even know about it at the time, but through this 5K run to help my family with any overrun cost from insurance that I paid for.
Yeah, traumatic brain injury tends to distort what you're aware of at the time, what you're not, you know.
And, even if I was aware of it,
Yeah.
I may have turned it down, but I'm all for safety nets, government ones for people in need. And I'm all for personal help for people in need. So the hypocrisy label never fit, but it's been really interesting since that accident. And because of the healthcare I needed and was incurring, I have been vilified by the left ever since. When I first came back to writing a column for the Oregonian at the time, people would write me and say, hey, how do you like that Obamacare now? Bet you're loving it. And I'm like, no. This made me even more conservative on the healthcare issue. We need to reserve dollars for people in need. I had insurance and it did its job. I purchased insurance. I made it a priority and it did its job. It paid almost all of the bills and kept me from financial ruin. And so when someone is not in a position where they have insurance that they choose to purchase, and they're in a situation that they've either put themselves in or they are in because of life circumstances, we need to help them with safety nets. And that's not Obamacare giving subsidies to various peoples regardless of income and expanding it over and over again. So it was an interesting thing.
I just want to call attention. I've already I've written my piece on my response to the stranger. You can see that at WashingtonPolicy.org. Just scroll down in the blog until you reach my response to the stranger. Elizabeth's being extra nice to them. I'm willing to poke a little more fun because I've just never seen something in print like that goes after somebody for their near-death experience accident, and the mental stretching that goes on to try to attack Elizabeth for her work on this is really quite laughable. So,
well, thanks, Dave. I enjoyed your
piece. It's
fun.
Yeah, thanks. And I enjoyed writing it. Let me put it that way. Let me quickly turn to another issue that you've touched on in the blog of late. That's eradicating job barriers. Some governors are removing the college degree requirement for state jobs. And we touched on this at one point before, but tell us what's happening in other states. And then let's just quickly kind of say, where is Washington State at when it comes to getting rid of this barrier of saying, hey, you have to have a college degree for this job, even though it's really not necessary.
Right. Well, other governors in other states, starting in about 2020, Republicans and Democrats have been looking to eradicate a college degree requirement from some state jobs to help them be able to employ and run their state services that they promised to taxpayers. So not all jobs require a college degree. Some do, and they're kept, but various governors have either issued, governors, the employer of state workers. So this is why it's on governors and why they're the ones doing it, not legislatures or something of that nature. But the governors have either issued an executive order asking for removal of this requirement in most state jobs, or they've asked the agencies or the state HR teams to look at whether or not a degree requirement is appropriate, if it ever was, if there are other things that could equal a degree requirement, that kind of thing. And so I am interested in this. I think we need to get more people employed, and with the cost of college and various barriers to applying for certain jobs, we need to be looking at this. I think that all employers, not just state government, should be acknowledging the many different routes to growing one's work qualifications, including on-the-job training and advancement, apprenticeship, internships, vocational training, and life experiences. A college education is not always the only way to acquire skills that are pertinent to a state job. So that's what the governor has done. Thankfully, the governor has asked his human resources team to create a best practices list that is used by agencies. And I was told that he didn't just issue a blanket executive order or something like that, because our government is not as centralized in its hiring practice as some other states. We leave that to agencies and hiring managers. And so there's a best practices list being drawn up, and agencies are being used to really look at all sorts of barriers that could exist in their hiring papers and paperwork.
I think that's great. I talked to a couple of young people recently that were both of college age, and I asked where they were going to go or what their plans were, and I enjoyed it because both of them were saying, I looked at it and I just thought I'm going to do something else. One of them talked about how they wanted to learn filming and film techniques and camera work, and they looked into colleges, and the degree was going to cost about $45,000 to $60,000 a year, and then they said, well, I think I can accomplish the same thing by just going to these brief technical film schools and do it all for 15,000. And another kid just said, I'm going to go get some work experience, and I'm going on these this overseas trip, a mission trip and other things, and I think I'll gain some experience there that'll help me elsewhere. And just like you point out, there's so many of these jobs where they put that degree where you want the degree there. And then as you get older, people at a certain point, you stop worrying about your college diploma. When you're young, you're just pointing to it because there's not much else you can put on your resume, right? There's just something that says, I've committed to something, I stuck with it for 4 years. But there's no reason to hold that against other people who did other awesome things and taught themselves skills, or learned a key trade, which shows that kind of dedication and persistence and discipline and other things. So I'm excited to see this trend and where Washington State will end up in it.
Me too. And it should be noted, this isn't trading a college degree for unqualified applicants. We're talking about keeping quality high, but going after skills and experience as a primary function rather than a college degree as a primary includer or discluder to a job. And I love how the Harvard Business School has put it. They said, jobs do not require four-year degrees, employers do. And that's key here. And it should be noted that there are various jobs in the state. If it legally requires, if the law requires, if you're an attorney for the state, you have to have a degree to be an attorney. And so those things stay. Medical degrees as well. There are jobs you can't have without a degree. So they're not looking at removing that or taking down quality. They're just making sure that there's not unnecessary barriers so we can get our state back up and running and offering the services it needs to, as well as helping open the door for applicants who traditionally would not be considered, which I think is really important.
One final question from our audience. Glenn writes, so is this payroll care tax, a backdoor way to pay for expanded Medicaid from Obamacare, since they want to reduce future Medicaid costs?
I don't think it's a backdoor way. I think it's out in the open that they have a big Medicaid long-term care bill because they're letting people use it regardless of having good clamps on it. And so they are going to let it reduce their Medicaid cost for long-term care. It will be devoted to that area of Medicaid, though. And our state is fabulous at expanding Medicaid in all sorts of different ways for people in need and people not in need. And that's a separate problem. You've got people on Medicaid who shouldn't be there, who haven't traditionally been there. And one of the biggest problems with expanding Medicaid is you're saying that people should get this usually substandard care. And the other problem is the state is not paying its way for the number of people we put on Medicaid that maybe shouldn't be there or don't have to be there. And Medicaid dollars are leaving for people in true need. And that's where they really need to be. And I think the state needs to reimburse healthcare providers at a higher level. What happens when they don't pay their way for their Medicaid patients is it comes out on everyone. It comes out on the hospitals. It comes out on the doctors. It comes out on people who pay for insurers, whether that's an employer or someone who pays for a private insurance on their own, all our costs are higher because they're not getting the money they need to care for the Medicaid patient. So this is a big problem. It's something that we need to be diligently talking about and helping people understand that Medicaid is a safety net for people in need. We need to keep it a safety net for people in need and introduce free market healthcare reforms that can lower costs for all of us. So I think that's the route we need to go down.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate you being on today and really interesting work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You bet. Let's talk with Liv Finne. She is our Center for Education Director, and Liv has been very busy this week. Not all of it is bad news, which is always nice to see. Liv, WASDA is voted 3-1 to abolish what you describe as the weighted vote rule. First, let's start with what is the Washington State School Directors Association, WASDA? How is it funded? And then let's find out what is that weighted vote rule. What's that rule? Where did it come from?
Okay, so WASDA is the Washington State School Directors Association, and it is a mandatory association of all school board directors, all elected school board members in the 295 school districts across the state. And there's about 1,400 elected school board members, and they all belong to this association. And this association is funded. There's a statute that provides that a certain percentage of the money provided by the state to educate each child is taken out of the budget of the local school district to pay for WASDA. So it's this is an example of what they call W organizations that all are too close to the state WEA union. All right, so. What happened last month was a revolt, essentially, within the WASDA organization. Since 1986, they have had the large school districts got themselves the power to vote according to the population of students they had, which they called a weighted vote, and this system, so that all the policies that were submitted to the membership every year for approval, they have these assemblies to decide what the WASDA policies should be across that are influential across all the school districts across the state. And so for years, the bigger school districts on the west side, most of them, there's one big school district on the east side, and that's Spokane, but most of the big school districts are over here in the Seattle area, Tacoma area, the Puget Sound area, and those districts got a more than a one vote for their district in these discussions with their members across the state. And so this, of course, is abundantly unfair and undemocratic, and it's been going on since 1986. And the result has been that the policies proposed by WASDA to the state legislature have been very closely aligned to the state union. Okay. The WEA union. So the lobbyists that WASDA pays for that show up in Olympia, they always are saying the same things: more money for the schools. They came out against charter schools. You remember, Dave, that back in 2012, the WASDA said we can't have charter schools in our state, and they opposed them. And that when all the evidence shows that having a charter school option was a good thing for students in Washington. So that tells you a lot about WASDA. So what's happened now is very interesting. All of a sudden, as you know, school board elections have become where everything's happening politically. This is the most amazing. It used to be a sleepy sort of thing. People that were sort of it didn't have much, it wasn't a controversial place. Let's put it that way. There wasn't much being done at these school board these school board meetings. Now, since COVID, they have become a hot spot, and parents are upset about what the schools have been doing since COVID, and they've been showing up in force. And now people are running for school board. And here in Washington State, we're seeing a lot more interest in people running for school board, and they have some hot issues to contend with. And so here we see an expression of this newfound interest in what's going on in the schools at the WASDA assembly. on September 22nd, they all got together for a couple of days to discuss what they should be doing for state, for the coming legislative session, what their policy should be, what everyone should be agreeing to, et cetera. And they decided by 3-1 vote to abolish this weighted vote process, which is an amazing, development, very exciting. And all of a sudden, small school districts, many of the districts in Washington state are small, they now have a voice. They have been silenced in the past. Now they have one district, one vote. And that is what happened. It's procedural, it's kind of dry, but it upends WASDA now. Now anything's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where the Seattle school districts say, well, why should we be on the same level as the smallest school district in the state? But it's about respecting. This is why our founders created our Senate, which has changed over time because of amendments. But originally, Senate that's where the states were represented. The House is where the people are represented. Yeah. This is where the school boards are represented, and they're not going to be represented if Seattle, if Seattle rules the roost forever.
Yes, and school boards we remember they were brought to us as a result of the progressive era. School boards are creatures of statute. They, before the late 1880s and the early 1900s, we didn't have school boards. They were just local places had raised money and gave it to the schools, and they had one-room schoolhouses all around the state, and there weren't elected school boards at all. But then with the progressive era, the idea being that if you elect your local school board members, you will be able to keep this monopoly government system of schools accountable through the actions of the people voting their representatives onto school boards. That's the concept anyway. And yeah. So in Washington state, that system hasn't worked very well, and this is one of the reasons that because the WASDA has been dominated by these large school districts with a certain political view and approach to things. And so the smaller districts have just been pushed out and haven't been heard from. And now they're going to be heard from.
So they voted to defeat Proposal 44. And you go into some detail on why that's a radical proposal and what it is. So why don't you share with us, kind of in the nutshell where that came from and what it is?
Well, it's so interesting. So the first thing, so one of the proposals that was put before the Assembly after this vote was this Proposal 44 from the Edmonds School Board and Shoreline. And that is a statement of diversity and inclusion and global education, and we want to all. It's one of these. I call them they're misleading. It's misleading. It sounds so good. We want everyone to be diverse and accept people of different backgrounds and be educated and the global citizenry and all this. But it's double talk. It's double speak.
Wasn't the word Orwell used newspeak or something? Newspeak. You say, I want diversity, but what you really mean is conformity, but they've they've switched it around so that the words they use are the words that we all know, but they've changed the definition. So it leaves your mind kind of hanging like, wait, I like diversity. I like inclusion. Right. And by inclusion, what they mean is exclusion from a number of things. Date. So it's a really bizarre newspeak kind of era that we live in, where you almost have to first take a step back and say, okay, when we're talking about this, we're going to use new parameters on this language, right? I'm going to challenge the language itself before we get in there.
Oh my gosh, it's mind blowing. It makes you spin. It's really difficult because you want to believe what the words say, but they do not. Diversity. The words diversity, equity, inclusion, institutional race, it's part of institutional racism, white supremacy, inherent bias, all the critical race theory, divisive, harmful ideology that's in the schools, the radical gender theory, all that, that et cetera, et cetera. So this is what that Proposition 44 was submitted to the Assembly, and the idea was that this radical school board in Edmonds, which is very radical school board, was trying to enforce It use its power to and influence to make all districts in the state adopt this. But of course, people are wise to this game now. These school board directors are very wise to what's going on, and they voted it down. Overwhelmingly voted it down. The small school districts said, no, we don't want to have anything to do with this, because we know that diversity does not mean diversity. We know that inclusion means exclusion of parents. That's what's, these policies that are coming down from the state are really harmful. I don't know how quite, I don't want to engage in hyperbole, and exaggerate, but I am really worried about this, because when you have a public school system take on a radical ideology, the very definition of public education is that we're supposed to include everyone, different races, different religions, different backgrounds. And now what's happened is one very narrow, partisan, hyper-political group has seized control over the curriculum. I mean, they're putting these concepts into the learning standards for English, history, math, all of it. All right. And this is why you're seeing the lowering of grading standards, the canceling of programs for gifted students, the lowering of graduation standards. California has just adopted a math learning standards at the state level that is just, that all the experts that I read and respect are saying is destructive. And even in the Atlantic magazine had an article this week from a professor of math at Stanford saying the learning standards that the state has just passed is full of this equity nonsense, and we need to get rid of it. And so, I can't say enough about how harmful this is. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that there are all these people running for school board, but also that the small districts are showing up in force and saying, no, we want to educate our children. We're not going to let these radicals take over our program and education. We're going to fight back. And I find that to be extremely encouraging. And I'm seeing other indications across the country of wins in this battle, like actual judgments, large judgments being awarded against school districts in California for excluding parents from knowing if their child is changing gender in the classroom, for example. And now there are appeals, lawsuits in the Federal Appeals, Circuit Court of Appeals in the 1st, 8th, and the 8th district, and the one out of, I think it's the 15th, I forget the number, the district of the Circuit Court of Appeals out of Florida. So the Northeast Circuit Court of Appeals, the Southeast Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Midwest Circuit Court of Appeals, they all have lawsuits going up and this will be decided by the Supreme Court. This is really an amazing development. Here we have, I know I'm talking too much, Dave, but shoot, here we have COVID learning loss that is serious. We have an emergency, and what has the state of Washington done? Launched itself into this critical race theory stuff.
Now hold that thought, because my understanding from this, which I got direct from an OSBI speech by the Superintendent Reichdahl, he said that some of the kids may have even gained from COVID because they gained different types of learning. So this whole emphasis on learning loss is, it's just a scare tactic from people like Liv Finne, the Washington Policy Center.
Well, okay, but
I love that too, because if there was so many gains with kids not going to school, what should? I mean, I just couldn't believe it was said.
I know. Well, he calls it accelerating and recovery. I mean, the man is an expert in George Orwellian talk. So, and he's now being attacked by the Seattle editorial board. And he's now, today there's an article in the paper in Seattle Times. 3 respected educators in Washington State wrote an editorial saying, taking a implied dig at him for not following where the federal COVID money went. Nobody knows where it went because he did not make it up. Here he is, the state elected leader. He did not make it a priority to use that money to provide individual tutoring to children, which all the experts say is the only way to catch them up, because of course every child is different in their loss or gain during COVID, and therefore that's the best way to spend the money. $2.9 billion. There was an article at the beginning of the week, Seattle Times reported about a federal audit saying we're one of 3 states in the country that attracted a federal audit for those dollars that we got during COVID. Okay, saying that we have not properly tracked that spending. And so So seriously, I mean, so anyway, I'm seeing movement in the good direction because today in the Seattle Times, there's this article that I mentioned. They have acknowledged that now educators are actually acknowledging that the Washington State has dropped in the rankings across the nation in education, which it has. It has fallen out of the top 10. It's now somewhere in the middle. It's definitely dropped. There's no reason for that. Our children should be doing top like they just did recently. And so maybe with this kind of internal debate amongst Democrats about, gee, we're not really getting good leadership here on education. Maybe we will at least acknowledge that there's a problem. But now the state leaders have been saying there is no problem. The children are accelerating in their recovery. I know I get a little outraged and upset, but when you think about all these children and how the leadership is ignoring what is happening, but the test scores keep coming down. The last recent ones, 61% of the kids in Washington State failed the state test in math. 61%. And
Well,
this is called accelerating in recovery by the state superintendent.
yeah, and let's remember that while we've been talking about it, 2 years worth of kids have graduated, and
Yes.
they've moved on, and they're forever left with that deficiency that has
Yes.
that experts say will have an impact on their ability to earn a living for the rest of their
Yes.
lives. It'll set them back, and it was not addressed. And but it's one of those classic things where systemically, when government gets large enough and it's not as accountable, not as directly accountable, you don't have the flexibility and the ability to do what's needed for the individual. And so, the system's protected, the system will survive it,
Yes.
but the
Yes.
individuals will suffer. And in this case, it's the children that are becoming adults that will not be served.
That's
So
right.
it's
And
sad.
every year it's about 85,000 students that graduate. Okay. So now we're talking 2 years. That's over almost 200,000 students have been launched off into the world without the quality education that were promised. And this is causing a real ripple effect in their lives. Like you say, and in Washington State, it's been an economist predicted a 7 to 9% permanent loss of income across their lives. Okay. And a $400 billion loss in economic activity for Washington State. So, this is a slow moving train wreck, and that our leaders are ignoring it does not do them credit. But of course, there's a vision elsewhere. I mean, of course, last week I heard that the state of North Carolina has just become the 10th state in the nation to offer universal school choice to every family in its state, and it will be the second largest school choice program in the country, which is amazing. So it gets right at your point, Dave, about how do we help the individual? Well, we free up the money. We free up the money the taxpayers provide. Let the parents control that money in an account for the purpose of educating children. Have that overseen by an auditor, which is what's happening. You get an education savings account for the use of educating your child, and you can use that in any way you see fit, and including paying private school tuition, homeschooling, buying, setting up some new school with your friends. I mean, it's a brand new day in education. People are now dreaming up new ways to educate children, much more effective ways than we've had in the past. So it's amazing to be living today because the COVID school shutdowns are making everyone look again at what is our public school system doing and not doing. And during COVID, it failed us. It stayed closed. And that is a major problem for our society to face head on, because our children are our future and they are entitled to get an education. And how do we best achieve that? Clearly, it's school choice.
One of my favorite quotes was that you were testifying before the legislature this past session, and there was a lady right before you who said the state was willing to fund empty seats during COVID, but they're not willing to fund the students, and I thought that is so powerful and she was right. There's all this clamor. Oh my gosh, we got empty seats. We got to get some money in here because we're otherwise, the system's not going to function. And so this focus was on the system and not the students that were not there,
Yeah, that's
just
such
crazy.
a great point. Yes. Yeah. So here, if in a fair world, you would hear that people had left the public schools. 46,000 children have left the public schools because they're dissatisfied with public schools. So in a fair system, you would give them money because they have not been served by the public system. But no, they give the school districts the money. they fail to serve the kids. So this would just never, this just not compute, right? And there's more coming. There are more people dropping out of, the numbers are dropping. All right. There's partially because of dissatisfaction, and I actually think, word of mouth is very powerful. When people start to feel that their children are unsafe in the public schools, they're not going to put their kids in. It just won't. And that just becomes like, it adds, the distrust and fear is very powerful. We've learned that from COVID. And if people start to fear the public schools, which they have reason to do. They have reason to fear the public schools in some ways.
Yeah, it's coming from all sorts of different directions, from people acting like the parents are, deserve to be on FBI most wanted lists because they're at a school board meeting and they're angry that they're being left out of key life altering decisions and acting like, the children belong to the school and the state first and not to the parents and things like this. But then there's also the outside, social decay that people are saying, like, in Seattle, we saw these drug encampments parked right outside the school gates. I just heard from a father. I was at a gathering this weekend where I heard a father describe how outside of a school he was at, there was, the parents were talking. They were concerned because there was, drug use and exchanges going on right outside the school. And he called. This was in the Everett area, and he had called about authorities and said, "Hey, what's going on?" They said, "Well, is anyone getting hurt?" And I was like, "Well, it's happening right outside the school. I mean, what's going on? It's only a matter of time." And there was just so little. It was just kind of like, well, this is the world we live in. There's kind of an acceptance of decay and an acceptance of low standards and criminality and things like that now, and that has parents concerned as well. Hey, before we run out of time, Liv, I have a final question for you. The WASDA, the Washington State School Directors Association, having been newly liberated and by the rural school districts, they voted to defeat this Project 44, the radical rule about the Orwellian use of the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where does that stand now? I mean, what happens with the schools? Do they decide individually whether to do it, or is that, does it have to go back to the state drawing board? Or how does that work?
Well, this was sort of an effort to ratify what the state has already ratified. Remember the Governor Inslee passed Senate Bill 5044 back in May 2021 in the heart of COVID. To require teachers to be trained in this diversity, equity, inclusion, and to eradicate institutional racism in the schools is a very bad idea. And so this was just an attempt to push the envelope even further. So what I see is that there's a direct threat now posed by the state to local control. That's what I see coming. The state does not like the fact that local districts can choose their own curriculum. And the state does not like the fact that school board directors have broad discretionary policy to set their own policies. And so what I see, and I saw it in this last session, there was an effort to punish districts that were not complying, not conforming. The word that you're saying is perfect. It's not accepting diversity. It's demanding and forcing compliance and conformity that the state wants. And that is where we're at. We've come to the point where the state is now going to challenge local district autonomy in a state where local control has been a long and honored tradition through the years and used by state officials to refuse responsibility. We don't have control over the schools. It's local control, but now the state officials want central control, and this will be very bad going forward. So what I'm hoping to see is these local school board directors that have now got some power start passing their own responses to Proposition 44, saying the Washington State School Directors Association does not support state efforts to take away local districts' broad discretionary power to set policy. The Washington State School Directors Association does not support and will oppose efforts to take away local district control over curriculum and textbooks chosen, et cetera, et cetera. So this I imagine that the people at WASDA have their stomachs in knots now, anticipating what the local school members are going to propose at the next assembly. It's very exciting.
When I worked for the legislature several years ago for the communication staff, I remember a debate going on about the McCleary funding, and there was a lot of leadership now on the left side of the aisle that were getting up and really hammering away at the majority coalition caucus proposal, because they said it would interfere with local funding and local control and parental control. And this makes me, since a lot of those individuals are still in power, I feel like we need to go back and find those clips so we can remind them just of how dedicated people are to local control, unless the control is going in a direction they don't want. So,
well, this is an expression of democracy. This is an expression of and democracy takes courage and energy and, eternal vigilance, as our founding, fathers have said. So it's,
and even more important, individual basic parental rights, where parents get to decide these things and decide them for themselves. Schools are failing math and science and reading and writing and all these things. If you ever want to know, the barnyard, the writing on the barnyard wall, metaphorically speaking, just grab one of those old grade school textbooks and try to take a test yourself on there. I've done this before for myself. And you look at these things that kids around the turn of the century used to take, and it's just, you're just floored by the breadth of knowledge that young kids used to have, and the changing of standards and other things. And there's varied reasons for that. I don't mean it's a clear apples to apples comparison, but it is indicative that standards have been lowered, and stretching our capacity for for what's being taught and how we're teaching it's not working. Let me put it that way. Hey, Liv, we're out of time, but I really appreciate you making the time today for us, because I know you're always super busy and following these things, and I appreciate you coming on for Washington Policy on the Go.
No, thank you very much, Dave.
You bet. All right. So don't forget, in 2 weeks, we'll have another Washington Policy on the Go. We try and do it every other week. If it's going to be canceled for any reason, I try to put that in the reminder email, so that if you see that email coming from Zoom and we're going to cancel, I try to put it in the subject heading. If for some event reason or for a holiday, we'll have to pause it. So we'll come to you every other week. Unless it's a legislative session, then it's every week. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget, if you saw this program and there's part of it you want to share, you can go to our YouTube channel and share that. In 24 hours or so, we'll have it up and posted. My name is David Bose. I'm the Communications Director for Washington Policy Center. Thanks so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.